Today, since it's feeling like a really fall day out there, I decided that we're going to make a nice pumpkin dessert. And I've already had a couple of requests for pumpkin crunch cake, and this is what I'm going to do today. It's a nice, easy dessert, and you probably have most of the ingredients in your house. So we are going to start out with 1 can of pumpkin. The recipe calls for 2 cups. But most of these cans, the smaller can is 15 ounces, which is a little bit less than 2, and that seems to work just fine. Otherwise, you can open up a second can and make some extra dessert. To the pumpkin, it's almost similar to a pumpkin pie, only in cake form, and it's not as labor intensive as making your pie crust. Okay, so we have the pumpkin, 1½ cups of sugar, 2 teaspoons of pumpkin spice mix, a dash of salt. It calls for a teaspoon of salt, but I just don't like to put in that much salt. And then 1 can of evaporated milk. I'm going to shake our milk well. You want to be sure that it's evaporated and not the sweetened condensed milk. And then 4 eggs. So as I said, it's similar to a pumpkin pie. You just mix everything together. While we're doing this, preheat your oven to 350 degrees. And lightly grease a 9 by 13 pan. Okay, those out of the way. Use my stand mixer. We're going to mix it just until it's well blended. Or just stir it by hand. Good. So it appears to be really runny and soupy, but that's what the consistency is. So we're going to pour this into my slightly greased 9 by 13 inch pan. What I like about this recipe is to have it set up and to be really good when you want to serve it. I make it a day in advance, and then it's all set to go. Okay, we're going to top this with 1 yellow cake mix. And that's what's going to give it some of that crunchy topping. And if your cake mix has some lumps in it, then you want to kind of get your lumps out as you're pouring it in. And then just pour it around. It looks like it's an awful lot, you know, to put in your pan, but you do want to use the whole bag. If there's any lumps in there, just, you know, take a knife and get them out. When it starts getting cold out, I love to make pumpkin desserts or apple pies and anything that reminds you of fall. Especially when the sun is shining, it's just a great day when it's kind of cold outside, but yet you see that sun. It's kind of nice to warm up the house with doing some baking. And we actually did quite a bit of baking yesterday. We have a wedding coming up, and we made 11 pies for the wedding, a variety of pies, with pumpkin being a couple of them, and some apples and Door County cherry pies. Okay, now we are going to top it with a cup of chopped pecans. And if you don't like pecans, or if you have somebody who has nut allergies, you could probably just eliminate the pecans. I think nuts always give something, whatever dessert you're making, extra flavor, whether it's, cowboy cookies or even the chocolate chip blonde brownies that I make. But my kids actually prefer a lot of these desserts without nuts, so I typically don't, put walnuts in some of those, but I do like this one with the pecans. Okay, now you're going to melt three quarters of a cup of butter, which is 1.5 sticks. The recipe actually called for 1 cup of butter, which I thought was way too much. And even if you're pouring this on and you think 3/4 of a cup seems like a little bit more than what you want, then just add less. But you want to kind of try to coat the whole topping. And that is your dessert. And now we're going to bake it in our preheated oven at 350 degrees for an hour. The recipe calls for a little bit longer, but an hour seems to work just fine. Okay, there we go. And now while that's baking, I actually have one that I made yesterday, and I'm going to top it with some whipping cream and then a little bit of pumpkin spice. We have a catering event coming up, so this is one of the requested items, and this is how it looks when it's done. And I did make this yesterday, so it's set up really nicely, and sometimes I'll use a glass of water with my knife, to clean off the knife as I'm cutting, if it is hard, to get through. Okay, the first piece is always a little bit difficult to come out, so sometimes you have to do a little bit of repair on that, like so, and you can kind of put it together, and nobody will even know that it wasn't perfect when it came out. So we're just going to put the whipped cream in my pastry bag. And then just in the middle of the dessert, then I'm going to make a big star with the whipped cream, like so. And then to finish it off, I'm going to just put a little bit more pumpkin spice on there. And that's our dessert for the day. So it's pumpkin crunch cake, or pie, you can call it. And that's going to be our nice fall dessert for the event that we're catering today. So I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Cooking with Ruth, and hopefully it's a nice, easy dessert for you. Something easy if you're having company. This is going to be cold, but it's also good heated up, warm too, just like a pumpkin pie would be. So from a slice of heaven, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and until next time, happy cooking.